Welcome, everyone. Let's dive right into an explainer that completely reframes how we look at an entire generation's financial reality. Look, today we're going to look past the stereotypes, we're skipping the endless debates about avocado toast, and we are digging into the actual economic and psychological data. We're breaking down what is truly happening with millennials and their money. And I promise you, the story the numbers tell is incredibly fascinating.
I want you to look at this core paradox because it sets the stage for everything we're talking about today. Why is the most financially educated generation also the most anxious? Think about it. Millennials grew up with podcasts on index funds, YouTube channels breaking down compound interest, and bite-sized videos explaining Roth IRAs before they even landed their first full-time jobs. They know the theory, yet by nearly every measure they are significantly behind where previous generations were at the exact same age. So what's going on here?
Section 1. The Financial Education Paradox.
Let's start by unpacking this massive gap between financial knowledge and actual wealth. This brilliantly illustrates that millennials aren't just ignoring their finances. Actually, it's the exact opposite. Bank of America data shows they are the generation showing the highest rates of budgeting app usage. They track literally every dollar. They are highly literate in personal finance, but that literacy is met with a really harsh reality: lower net worth and delayed homeownership.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that this widespread anxiety isn't a failure of discipline. It's the result of what psychologists call the locus of control gap. Millennials were taught a very specific formula, right? If you budget, if you avoid bad debt, the system will reward you. But they're doing all those things, and the system just isn't responding. It's like a rigged feedback loop, and it's incredibly taxing on your mental health to do everything right and still feel like you're falling behind.
Section 2. Math versus the coffee myth.
Now let's look at the actual math to completely dismantle those avocado toast and coffee accusations. Picture this. It's 2010, you just graduated, and you step out into a staggering 12% youth unemployment rate. You're forced to take a job paying maybe $32,000 a year, while carrying student loans that, adjusted for inflation, are nearly triple what your parents paid. This wasn't a normal starting line. This was a starting line drawn 10 yards behind everyone else's.
And when you crunch the numbers, the myth falls apart completely. A 2019 analysis proves the math doesn't work. If you strip out housing and healthcare, discretionary spending is actually comparable to or even lower than past generations at the same age. The cost of simply staying alive and housed skyrocketed. Between 1990 and 2020, median home prices relative to income roughly doubled. Wages? Yeah, they definitely did not double. So the problem was never brunch habits.
This brings us to a really fascinating behavioral concept called substitution. When a down payment takes years of extreme savings just to enter the market, traditional assets feel mathematically impossible. So what do people do? They make the rational, psychological choice to spend on what they can afford. A nice coffee, a small experience. Spending on a coffee isn't recklessness, guys. It's a psychological defense mechanism. When the big thing is closed off, you buy the small things to maintain some quality of life.
Section 3. The Double Recession Trap.
Now we get to the real underlying issue, and what's wild about this timeline is how it visualizes pure bad timing. Federal Reserve data clearly shows why millennials hold a smaller share of U.S. wealth. They graduated right into the 2008 historic financial crisis. Then they spent the 2010s fighting high rent and stagnant entry-level wages. And right as they hit their 30s, their peak wealth-building years, boom, 2020 hits. They were dealt back-to-back catastrophes right when their wealth was supposed to compound.
Which leads to this heartbreaking quote: "No amount of personal optimization fixes a structural problem." The culture relentlessly insisted the problem was individual, right? Pushing people to cut subscriptions, cancel the gym, grind harder. But you literally cannot outbudget a structural problem. If your rent eats 45% of your income, skipping a latte does not close that gap.
Section 4. Psychology of the side hustle.
Let's examine the side hustle, because millennials essentially invented the modern version of it. A 2022 Pew Research study highlighted that a massive share of employed adults under 40 rely on secondary income through freelance or gig work. Now, on the surface, this looks like pure ambition. But underneath, it's actually an insurance policy against a system that never promised them stability or pensions. They assumed from day one that a single job would never be enough to keep them safe.
And this perfectly encapsulates their extreme risk management. Just look at the difference here. They'll accept six-figure student loans because they view it as an unavoidable, mandatory toll just to enter the workforce. But credit card debt? Well, having watched 2008 happen, they treat a $200 credit card balance like a plague. It's viewed as an optional moral choice, and they avoid it at all costs. This extreme risk management creates a pattern that heavily confuses older generations. Step 1, they witness older generations lose stability in 2008. Step 2, as a result, they refuse to commit to volatile 30-year mortgages. Step 3, they delay major milestones like marriage and kids indefinitely. Older generations often misread this as immaturity, but it's actually a deeply paralyzing attempt to be responsible. They're waiting for a certainty that just keeps receding.
Section 5. The social media highlight reel.
Adding fuel to this fire is a completely new psychological burden that no previous generation had to face. Millennials are the first generation to watch other people's finances in real time. Past generations felt behind compared to a few neighbors or coworkers. It was a small circle. But millennials, they feel behind compared to an infinite, algorithmically amplified crowd. It creates an absolutely exhausting layer of performative anxiety right on top of actual financial strain.
And a 2021 study proved exactly how damaging this is. Increased social media use directly correlates with lower financial satisfaction, completely independent of your actual income level. Even though we intellectually know the internet isn't real life, the human brain simply isn't built to process this volume of comparison without a massive cost to our well-being.
Section 6. Escaping the money trap. So how do we reframe this whole shebang so you can actually find peace? This slide brilliantly summarizes the trap. We are looking at compounding structural disadvantages from 2008 and 2020, a false narrative of individual blame, a massive gap between financial knowledge and surplus capital, and real-time comparison to curated lives. It's not a character flaw, it's a liquidity trap disguised as personal failure. The first step to peace is to stop trying to out-optimize an unfair system through sheer willpower alone. You just can't do it. The millennials who are actually thriving today have made peace with slower timelines. They've accepted different milestones, and they have finally stopped measuring their own progress against an invisible, algorithmically distorted highlight reel. Understanding that your financial anxiety is a rational response to a rigged system is your first real step toward changing your future. It's not about making excuses, it's about taking your power back. So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. How will you step out of the comparison trap and adjust your timeline today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.